Warpucks. Here we go with the Fat Electrician. He's going to teach us a secret weapon that won World War II, the VT Fuze. Now, I cannot make any claim to know anything about this. This is weapons design. I know practically nothing about that besides the basics, you know. Especially when it comes to World War II weapons. Not a clue. This is going to be an educational experience for me, to say the least. So, I'm going to be sitting back, strapping in, and figuring out something about this, finding out some information. It's going to be nice. I hope you guys learn something as well. I hope the Bureau of Ordnance isn't involved with the Navy, because if it is, my brain's going to explode. That's just how it is. Guys, the Fat Electrician is one of the best internet historians, period, because he tells us what we need to know. Now, aside from all that, guys, all of his sponsors are in the links in the description down below. Check out the sponsor list. He has some great sponsors. We're going to go ahead and get started. Remember, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let's get into it.
Does anybody else remember that one time in the 1940s when nobody could get Christmas lights and nobody knew why, and then it came out like 10 years later that it was because America figured out how to turn Christmas lights into a super weapon to win World War II? Yeah, me neither, but we're going to get into it anyways.
Let's go.
Today we're talking about the single most impactful weapon of World War II that gave the Allied forces an unprecedented advantage over their enemies. And before you say it, no, it is not nuclear bombs, okay? By the time nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan, it was not a question of who was going to win the war, it was a question of how is America going to end it, and America chose to close it out with a bang. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that the weapon that we're talking about today is the weapon that got us to the grand finale, not the grand finale itself. Okay. And that weapon is the VT Fuze, aka the proximity fuse. And we're going to get into it right after a word from our sponsor.
Let's go.
I have a headache.
Have you drank water?
Yeah.
All right, here. Try one of these.
What is it?
It's called Element. It's going to be even better than water.
Not bad.
Yeah, just try not to get lipstick on my water bottle.
I'll get lipstick on something.
I gotta go. This video is brought to you by Element. Okay, look, I'm gonna keep this simple. It's basically a rehydration drink, but unlike all the shit you can buy over at the gas station, it actually has more electrolytes, they're in the right ratios, and it's not full of food dyes and sugar. Okay, watch, I'm gonna read the entire ingredient list because I actually know all of these words, which right off the bat's a good sign. Okay, here we go. Sparkling water, salt, citric acid, magnesium, potassium, natural grapefruit flavor, and stevia leaf. That's fucking it. And then somehow they actually managed to make this shit taste good, okay? They've got all your normal flavors like watermelon, fruit punch, but then they also have mango chili, which is actually spicy. Then they've got chocolate, and then when you mix that with warm water, it tastes like hot chocolate. And then if you're a psychopath, or if you're just ultra health-minded and you don't want artificial flavorings, you can get the raw, unflavored version that's literally just salt, potassium, and magnesium. Personally, I like that one because it tastes like commie tears. Okay, and I know what you're thinking. Why on earth is some sports drink that's formulated for elite level athletes sponsoring a dude called the Fat Electrician? I've got news for you. Middle-aged fat dudes sweat too, okay?
True.
Okay, look at me. I sweat in a cold shower. Why do you think I'm wearing tank tops all the time, okay? So when I go to jujitsu 5 times a week to pretend like I'm Joe Rogan or Jocko Willink for an hour or two, I get super sweaty, then I get muscle cramps, and this shit helps. And then on top of that, I have a horrible habit of getting aggressively drunk with my friends and being hungover the next day, and this helps with that too. Okay, so if you want to give it a try, they've got it in cans, they've got it in little drink pouches. If you use my link down below, you're going to get a free sample pack, and there's a money-back guarantee. If you don't like it, they'll refund the entire thing.
It will be in the description, guys.
Go to drinklmnt.com/thefatelectrician. Let's get back to the video.
Let's go.
Our story begins in 1939, and at this point in time, there's approximately 2 different types of fuses for artillery and anti-aircraft rounds. Okay, first we have the direct hit fuse, which essentially is exactly what it sounds like. The round hits something solid, it then blows up. This is typically what's used in artillery. And then we had a variable timed fuse that was more commonly used in anti-aircraft rounds. Basically, if you saw planes coming in, you would try to guess how far away they were, and then you would time how long it would take the projectile to get there. And there was a knob on the round where you could set it to detonate at like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds. You would do some quick math and then try to shoot it at the plane, and then after it left the barrel 7 seconds later, it would explode in midair, whether it was near the plane or not. Right. And then, as I'm sure you can imagine, trying to guesstimate the range on a plane and then guesstimate where it's going to be at, and then trying to have all these factors aligned to blow up at the exact moment that it's near the plane wasn't very effective.
Right.
And to put not very effective into perspective, in the early days of World War II, they said it took somewhere between 2,500 and 1,800 anti-aircraft rounds to down a single plane. So pretty much everybody on the planet had basically the same idea, like, man, wouldn't it be cool if the anti-aircraft round just magically knew when it got near the plane and blew up at the exact perfect moment every single time. So pretty much everybody all over the planet has this like on the back burner trying to figure out this new type of weapons technology. Japan, Germany, the UK, America, everybody's been working on this in the background, but there's not a big rush because there's no war going on at the time.
It would suck being an anti-aircraft pilot, operator back then, because my God, the amount of math.
And then September 1939, World War II kicks off, and then almost exactly a year after that, Germany starts heavily bombing Britain in the Blitz, and now Britain has a pretty good incentive to figure out this new type of weapons technology.
Right.
Now, the UK doesn't really know how they're going to pull this off, but they do know they need to figure out how to get small electronics to be able to survive inside of an artillery round after it's been fired, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, it's subjected to a lot of G-force, which is going to break small electronic devices, especially back in the 1940s when everything was run off of vacuum tubes.
Right.
So the British figure out right out of the gate, like, hey, this thing's spinning at 50,000 rotations per minute once it's fired. We need to make these electronic components as small and as light as possible so they don't rip themselves apart just under the G-force of their own weight. Which makes perfect sense. I mean, when Dad's had one too many chiladas on a Sunday afternoon and decides he's going to get the kids going on the Ferris wheel as fast as he can, the fat kid flies off first, okay? That's just science. Was I the fat kid? Don't fucking worry about it. I had a great childhood, okay? Now, at this point in time, Britain is in full-on war production. All of their industrial capacity is being used to build new warplanes to defend themselves, and they don't have the capacity to start investing in all this like new microcircuitry and tiny little itty-bitty vacuum tubes. So they decide, hey, we're just gonna order 20,000 miniature electron tubes from this hearing aid company over in America. And then the American War Department hears about this, and they're like, you guys working on fucking hearing aids right now while the Germans are bombing you every night? No, you're not. What the fuck are you up to? So the British comes clean and they tell America, like, hey, we're allies, whatever. Here's what we're doing. We're trying to develop this anti-aircraft round that can sense when it gets near a plane and then blow up in midair and fuck up all these planes. So we quit getting bombed every night. At which point America's like, cool, great, dope, whatever. We'll give you whatever you need, but you have to give us all of the information that you get from your testing, so we have it also. So the British go, they do their testing, they do figure out how to get the electrical components to survive being shot out of an artillery shell, but they don't really figure out anything else after that. They don't figure out how to actually make it sense the plane, and they don't figure out the biggest problem of how in the fuck do you get a power source to all these electrical components, because it's 1940 and batteries aren't really that great at this point in time.
Right.
So the entire project just kind of gets shelved, regarded as impossible. Nobody can figure out how to do it. Everybody just kind of moves on. And then fast forward to 1941, Japan commits the ultimate cardinal sin of touching America's boats.
Oh, now you fucked up. You have fucked up now.
At which point Uncle Sam is like, here, hold my beer. You, go get a bunch of science nerds, tell them I want to put a sun inside of a bomb so I can drop it on my enemies. Hand me my lab coat. I'm going to go figure out this magic bullet that knows when to blow up thing. Okay, I've said this once and I'll say it again. Nothing stokes human creativity like the desire to kill a motherfucker that you don't like, because America figures out how to make a proximity fuse in like a couple of months.
Nice.
So more or less, oversimplified version of what they did. They took a Doppler radar, stuck it inside of this artillery round. That way, when the round is flying through the air, it's constantly emitting pulse signals, and then if there's open air, the pulse signals aren't hitting anything, so they're not coming back to the round. But when the round gets close to something solid in the sky, like an enemy plane, the signals hit the plane, bounce back, and the round can sense that, and then when the round senses that it's close enough to the plane, it blows up and there's fucking death confetti everywhere at the exact perfect moment. And that's not even the crazy part. The crazy part is the battery, right? Because we can't just put a normal battery inside of this artillery round, because by the time that we build it in America, ship it across the ocean, the shitty batteries in the 1940 would have lost the charge, and then the round's just gonna be a dud right out of the gate. So what they did is they took a small vial of acid, put it in the middle of the artillery round, and then surrounded it with lead, and then hooked it up to electrodes, so that when the artillery round was fired, the glass would break, the acid would get all over the lead and create an electrical current to power the Doppler radar while it was in flight. Okay, do you understand what I just said? America created an artillery round that, after it was shot out of a howitzer, would manufacture its own battery mid-flight to know when to fuck up the enemy. But how long does the battery last? Buh. For the enemies in the plane, it's a lifetime supply. Homie. It's the last battery they're ever gonna need. Now, to be fair, there is some obvious problems, you know, like having a small vial of glass being the only thing that's standing between you and an artillery round blowing up the second it gets near anything solid is kind of terrifying. As I'm sure you can imagine, transporting that would be a nightmare because if one of those things breaks, you're gonna blow up the entire truck. So as a safety mechanism, they actually ended up
and everything around it.
Cutting little tiny wafers of lead and stacking them all along the vial. And then if the vial broke, it would just kind of like leak out and it wouldn't do anything. But when it was shot out of a gun, the 50,000 rotations a minute would have enough centrifugal force to make the lead fly out and in between all the lead wafers, and that's how it would power. So the shell's only gonna go off when it's spinning after it's been fired out of a gun. So America's done it. We've essentially made magic bullets, and now America is gonna do what America does best. We're gonna tie up this solution in bureaucratic nonsense so that nobody can use it.
Yes!
Son of a bitch. Wow. Okay.
Just trying to help you, Mike.
It is the way of the world, Warpugs. What will we do without bureaucracy?
Bitch!
Yeah, the man in charge of this project, Commander William S. Parsons, decides he's not going to let this project move forward until he's 100% convinced that this product is perfect. So the proximity fuse has essentially been shelved yet again. Cue my favorite naval commander of all time, Willis Augustus Lee, aka Ching Lee.
On your left.
Yes. Yes. There he is.
Okay, I did a whole video on this guy a while back. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go watch it because he's absolutely incredible. But the real quick and dirty of it is this guy has these super thick glasses because when he was in like 7th grade, he got bored and built a bomb that blew up in his own face and permanently damaged his vision. So naturally, he then went on to become a 5-time gold medalist sharpshooter in the Olympics. He then went on to become a strategic genius in the Navy. He is the reason that every single American naval vessel in World War II is absolutely covered in anti-aircraft guns. Using his sharpshooting experience, he is the one that figured out and developed the calculations for a battleship battery to take into account the Coriolis effect, or the rotation of the Earth in targeting data. And he is also the one that pioneered being able to shoot at an enemy using nothing more than radar, even when you can't see the enemy. The man is a prodigy that changed warfare forever. And at this point in time, early 1942, essentially right after Pearl Harbor, Ching Lee was given orders to basically go around the Navy and just cut through red tape and unfuck everything to get the entire Navy as ready as possible.
There you go.
And even though he had the authority to cut through red tape, the problem was this was 1942. You couldn't send a text message, you couldn't send an email. Everything was done by either handwritten or typed letters, and then you had to stamp everything with like priority, urgent, standard, telling the mail carrier in the military, like, how quick does this letter need to get where it's going?
Right.
And urgent, being the fastest option, wasn't fast enough for Ching Lee. So he went and had his own custom rubber stamp made, and he used red ink, and in all caps, his rubber stamp said, frantic. So that way, every time Ching Lee had a project that he wanted to get pushed through the Navy as fast as possible, he would stamp it with a big red frantic, and then every paper pusher in the Navy has that come across their desk, and they're like, oh shit, oh fuck, I've never seen anything labeled frantic, and they grab it, and that is now their sole mission in life, to get this to the next place. So all his shit gets done super fast.
Nice.
So as soon as Ching Lee hears that we've essentially made magic artillery shells tied up in bureaucratic nonsense, he gives it the old frantic stamp and pushes it right along, saying, and I quote, "We're looking for a workable solution, not a perfect one."
There we go.
So it immediately goes into testing, and its first test is to have an anti-aircraft battery on the ground firing at a bunch of radio-operated drones above, and these proximity fuses absolutely crush these drones, okay? The only person disappointed was the commanding officer of the drones because he was mad they were shooting down all of his drones.
You ruined my free toy!
Great, next phase of testing takes place in August of 1942. They take the proximity fuses out in the USS Cleveland, and they're going to try to shoot down drones over the ocean. This testing is slotted for 2 full days, and they've got 3 drones to shoot down, okay? Bear in mind, the British are reporting back that it's taking approximately 1,800 anti-aircraft artillery rounds to down a single enemy plane. So, with one ship shooting at 3 different planes, this should take a while. Testing ended up getting cut short because the USS Cleveland shot down all 3 drones with the first 4 rounds fired. Statistically speaking, this should have taken between 5,000 and 6,000 rounds, and it took 4. So obviously at this point, America's all in. Call up Rosie the Riveter. We've got something new to make. The whole 9 yards, right? Now the problem is, how the fuck are we going to mass produce this thing, right? Because we're using these tiny little tubes that were used from hearing aids, and hearing aid manufacturing isn't that big at the time. We're not going to be able to mass produce this thing. So the government goes out to General Electric, which coincidentally is the biggest manufacturer of Christmas lights on the planet at this point in time and is like, here's the deal. You're not making Christmas lights anymore. You're gonna take those little Christmas lights, and instead of putting a little light filament in there, you're gonna fill it with this acid, and then you're gonna seal off the other end, and you're gonna give it to us, and you're gonna shut the fuck up about it, okay?
There you go.
At which point GE is like, cool, government contracts are awesome. Now we've got the manufacturing and we can mass produce this thing. This is why you don't touch the boats, all right? You touch the boats, one thing leads to another, and now we're weaponizing Christmas lights.
I think you might be overdoing it, Dad.
Russ.
That is America's slogan. We will kill you in your sleep on Christmas.
When was the last time I overdid anything?
Okay, seriously though, this is absolutely huge. This has to be top secret. Nobody can know about this.
Yeah.
Even the dudes in the anti-aircraft battery don't know that they're firing a proximity fused ammunition. They just know that suddenly overnight they got like 20 times better at their job. And because this technology absolutely cannot fall into enemy hands, it becomes standard practice that they're only allowed to shoot proximity fused ammunition over water. So the only people that are gonna have access to this are the Navy, and then we're also gonna give it to the British over in England because their anti-aircraft defenders are firing out over the English Channel.
Right.
So any duds are going to land in the water and sink to the bottom of the ocean and ideally be unrecoverable. And then there's the last problem. What are we going to name this thing, right? We don't want to call it anything too obvious, right? The reason that we call tanks was because back in World War I, when the British developed the first tank, they just called it that because on the chart list, they wanted anybody that intercepted documents to think, oh, it must be like a water tank or
Right.
something. So we have to have
That's actually how it goes. That's actually how the tank got its name. In other fiction where like it's alternate history, tanks are called like the thing that we eventually called a tank. I think like they've had several different names, one of them being barrels, other things like that.
Have a deceptive name. So they came up with the VT fuse. And that way, anytime somebody was like reading a chart or an inventory list and they just read VT fuse, they'd go, what the fuck is a VT? Oh, variable timed fuse, those old school ones that just, you know, you spin the knob and it blows up in 7 seconds. Whoop-de-doo, who cares? So we've got it. Everything's perfect. America starts manufacturing 250,000 of these rounds every single week. We start sending them out with the US Navy, and then we ship a ton of them over to Great Britain so they can start defending themselves against all these German bombing raids that they've been dealing with for like over a year at this point. The first VT fuse to down an enemy was on January 5th, 1943, when the USS Helena shot down a dive bomber. And from that moment on, the US Navy and the British air defenders started wrecking house with this new ammunition. The British reported back that the average amount of ammunition expenditure went from 1,800 rounds to down an enemy plane to 85. They said not only were they shooting down way more enemy planes with way less ammunition, but the proximity fuse was actually so sensitive and so good at its job that when it got near a bird in flight, it would blow up the bird. And at this point, common sense would tell you like, okay, maybe we should dial back the sensitivity on this thing a little bit if we're blowing up something as small as a bird, but no, because that means that it's going to be perfect to actually shoot down the German V1 rocket. Germany's been shooting these V1 rockets into Britain, and there's almost nothing they could do about it. They just kind of had to grit their teeth and take the hit every single time because these rockets were moving way too fast for the anti-aircraft artillery batteries to actually do anything to them, like 99% of the time. I actually found one account from a British soldier, and I'm paraphrasing here, but more or less he says that we knew we couldn't do anything against the V1 rocket bombs, but we would still go out there and shoot at them anyways, even though we knew we weren't going to shoot them down, just because it made the citizenry feel better because they didn't feel like they were completely helpless. They went from shooting down less than 10% of the V1 rockets to shooting down 85% of them with the new VT fuse. Now, panning back over to the US Navy in the Pacific, it's basically a turkey shoot at this point, and the Japanese are finding out the hard way that traditional dive bombing tactics are way less cool when the bullets flying past you don't fly past you and explode right next to you and shoot your plane down, right? Because that's what they've been used to the entire time. When they were getting shot at with actual variable timed fuses that had a secondary timer, the fuses were either blowing up way in front of them or they'd fly right past them and blow up behind them, and they were typically fine. But now, all of a sudden, for no reason from their perspective, all of the fuses are blowing up at the opportune moment every single time. The Americans are shooting down so many Japanese planes that they're literally running out of planes and pilots. And over the course of a little bit over a year, they've basically completely run out of experienced pilots because they don't do what the Americans do, where they're like like, oh, we've got a really good, seasoned, experienced pilot. We're going to pull him out of combat, send him back to go train all the new guys, so all of our new guys are up to a higher standard. No, most other militaries don't do that. They're just constantly sending in their best guys every single time. And because of that, after about a year and a half of the VT Fuze being used in combat, not only is there no good Japanese pilots left in combat, there's no good pilots left on the back end to train all the new guys, so now their entire Air Force is just completely crippled. And this is why by October of 1944, the Japanese resorted to kamikaze attacks, literally just bolting young men into the cockpit of a plane and sending them on a one-way mission to their death. And while that is unfortunate for them, luckily for the Americans, the VT Fuze does not discriminate. It can't tell the difference between a dive bomber and a kamikaze, so it just blows them up too. There's a bunch of different stories where a bunch of different ships have shot down a ton of kamikazes using the VT Fuze, but the shining example is the USS Laffey. The Laffey is a Fletcher-class destroyer, and the Fletcher-class destroyers was America's mass production ship during World War II. These things are so lightly armored that they are nicknamed tin cans. Using the VT Fuze in a single battle over the course of an hour, the Laffey went toe-to-toe with 22 Japanese kamikazes, shot down 9 of them, and heavily damaged the rest. Do you understand how demoralizing that has to be to the enemy? Like, there's entire countries on Earth right now that don't have 22 aircraft in their entire military. I think the average for a first world country is somewhere between 100 and 150 total aircraft across all branches of their military.
Except for us, because we have to be special.
And that's fighters, bombers, recon, absolutely everything. Could you imagine throwing all of the fighter planes your country has at a singular ship that's referred to as a tin can, and it fucks up all of them? By this point in time, the VT Fuze has officially changed naval and aerial warfare forever. And it's about to change warfare as a whole, because by late 1944, Eisenhower sees how effective the VT Fuze is for the Navy in Great Britain, and he ends up demanding that they give it to his ground troops in Europe. After seeing how overwhelmingly effective they are, he doesn't give a shit about it being top secret and only firing it over the ocean anymore, because by the time they're able to capture a dud and reverse engineer it, the war's going to be over, and he knows that. So they take the VT Fuze and they start sticking it in normal artillery. Now, normal artillery up until now was usually direct impact, right? The shell hits the ground, it explodes, launches shrapnel everywhere. That's still pretty effective, but if a dude is like dug into a hole, all the shrapnel is going to fly right over the top of him, right? And half the shrapnel, once it hits the ground, goes into the fucking ground immediately. So now with the proximity fuse, it's going to sense the ground 40, 50, 60 feet above, and it's going to blow up and blow all that shit straight down on top of people, whether they're in a foxhole or not. This new artillery is so devastating that the first time it's ever used in combat, it basically puts the linchpin in the European theater and ends the war. Because the first time the VT Fuze was used in combat was at the Battle of the Bulge. Okay, if you don't know what the Battle of the Bulge is, essentially Germany was on their heels and they decided, fuck it, we're going to throw one big last Hail Mary. We're going to take everything we've got in one big offensive and attack the American line, try to punch through with our blitzkrieg tactic and destroy the Americans. And it was working out for them right up until it started raining metal. The new airburst artillery absolutely shredded German infantry units. There was nowhere they could hide. Foxholes weren't really that effective against airburst, and even if they wanted to dig one, the ground was half frozen. And when they tried to hide in the wood line, the airburst literally cut the forest down around them. You can find pictures of the Ardennes forest after the Battle of the Bulge, and the tops of the trees are just cut off with complete carnage underneath them. But Chubby Electron guy's exaggerating. The VT Fuze wasn't that big of a deal, and it didn't make a huge impact at the Battle of the Bulge. Buh. You know what? Fine. Don't take my word for it. I wasn't there. Let's see what General Patton had to say about it. And I quote, "The funny Fuze won the Battle of the Bulge for us. I think when all the armies get this shell, we will have to devise some new method of warfare." So yeah, while nuclear bombs ended World War II in the Pacific theater in particular, they are not the weapon that got the war to its end. That credit belongs to the VT Fuze in both the European and the Pacific theater, and for that reason, it is the most important weapon of World War II.
There you go.
I want to give a special thank you, because this video would have never happened if it wasn't for Fort Sill, the home of the artillery down in Oklahoma. In particular, Corey, the curator over at the Air Defense Artillery Training and Support Facility, which is basically a museum for the history of American air defense weapons platforms, and the proximity Fuze was one of probably 200 exhibits there. Me and my friend Ethan, also known as Habitual Line Crosser here on YouTube, got together and we're making a new Pepperbox exclusive show where we get to go around the country and tour military museums and learn from the curators at those museums. And here's the teaser for that.
Training support facilities are not open to the public, and they are Basically, facilities that we can bring in soldiers to instill a little bit of esprit de corps to them. And Congress finds themselves looking down the barrels of too hot 40 millimeters. When you hurt Congress, that's going to be the end of your program.
It worked perfect. Why are they mad? It hates piles of shit. It's awesome. This is my new favorite tank. There's nothing funnier than just America being like, this is cool. We're going to take it and put it in a museum.
And that's a large blow up of the day that Japan fucked around. We get to the find out
section.
Yeah, the find out section just passed.
Suck that, German engineering.
Can't build a prox fuse, can't win a world war. Fucking sucks to suck.
Well, you can get these on eBay, too. I mean, about, what, 42,000?
Oh, you shouldn't have told him that.
I know, right?
Are you getting an M45 now?
I mean, I'll put all the money we make from this for the next 10 years towards it. Telling me size doesn't matter. It's how you use it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's all about how you use it. So that's also what someone with small rockets would say.
There you go.
We
See that?
Yeah. Please don't lick the artifacts. Unfortunately, the motors need the brushes replaced. Which that's a major overhaul on that one.
No, it's not. I'm an electrician. I know how to replace brushes.
You know what? You are more than welcome to come here, and this is one that I'd let you work on.
I think that first episode is almost 2 hours long, and it is available right now.
Dude, that would be baller if he got
the
able to do that.
Check it out.
I'm just saying.
That, thank you for watching. I gotta go.
Okay. It's a thing, but every once in a while, because we don't even consider this kind of stuff. We really don't. It takes, like, there was the advent of some weapons that really changed the face of warfare, and you know that that weapon did so because a major event happened, such as cannons and the fall of Constantinople. The nuclear bomb, because it was the nuclear damned bomb. But the VT fuse itself, this was a weapon, like many other weapons, that came in and provided a massive advantage to a country that led to that country being able to essentially win the war. Tanks, not so much, but, you know, they were there. But we really have to look at how powerful the VT fuse was at the end of the day when it came to actually doing the stuff that needed to be done to win the Pacific War and the war in the Atlantic. Now, the proof is in the amount of rounds, really, that he was talking about earlier. The proof is in the absolute amount of rounds that would get spit out and would not do anything but, you know, maybe graze a cockpit or two. And then all of a sudden you have planes just getting shot down out of nowhere. And there was no way that the Germans and the Japanese didn't know something was up. They knew the Americans had something that was giving them this sudden boost of ability when it came to blasting them out of the sky. And as well as the British. But that is warfare. That is how warfare works. Mustard gas, other things like that, had major effects on warfare, but it's the inventions that we don't hear that much about that sometimes had the biggest impact. Warpugs, thank you for checking this out with me. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe to Fat Electrician. All of his links are going to be in the description down below. Join as a member of Patreon for early access, and I'll catch you guys next time.